What's up, freaks? This was brought to you by River. River's a Bitcoin company built by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners the right way. There's no trusted third parties. They build all their infrastructure. They have free DCA because they know it's the best way to buy Bitcoin. So if you want to buy Bitcoin, you want to mine Bitcoin, you want to send Bitcoin over the Lightning Network, you want to plug into their Lightning Network API. If you're a developer, they're building all these tools for you. They also encourage self-custody. Again, they're Bitcoiners. They want to provide an on-ramp for you and then teach you and encourage you to take control of your own Bitcoin. And they're doing this. It's a beautiful company. If you do hold Bitcoin on the exchange, you can know for sure, since they don't rely on any third parties, they don't lend your Bitcoin out, they don't speculate with your Bitcoin. Your Bitcoin is held in a multi-sig wallet with 100% reserves. Okay? So go to river.com/TFTC, take advantage of the no-fee DCA. You set up your dollar cost average. You don't pay any fees on those buys. If you're a developer, they have their Lightning Network Services API that you can build on. You can send over Lightning. You can mine via River as well. You may have your exchange. You may be comfortable with it, but have you tried River yet? It's a question you have to ask yourself. If the answer is no, go try it. That's where all the Bitcoiners are hanging out. That's where I get my Bitcoin as well. River.com/TFTC. Thank you guys for listening. If you're listening on YouTube, please subscribe, set the notifications up as well. We're going to be putting out a lot of content this year. If you want to subscribe to the podcast feed as well, if you're not around your computer or not listening on YouTube, but you want to catch the podcast on the podcasting feeds, subscribe on your favorite podcasting app. And if you want to learn more about Bitcoin, I write a newsletter almost daily during the week. Go to tftc.io, subscribe on the website, and you'll get pure signal on Bitcoin, macroeconomics, geopolitics, whatever tickles my fancy that day. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you for supporting the show. If you can subscribe, rate, review, goes a long way. We're trying to blow this up in 2023. Enjoy the rip.
You've had a dynamic where money's become freer than free.
If you talk about a Fed just gone nuts, all the central banks going nuts.
So it's all acting like safe haven.
I believe that in a world where central bankers are tripping over themselves to devalue their currency, Bitcoin wins. In the world of fiat currencies, Bitcoin is the victor.
I mean, that's part of the bull case for Bitcoin.
If you're not paying attention, you probably should be.
What's up, freaks?
How's it going?
It's going good. We got it's not weird. We got two in the studio.
I wish I was there with you guys.
We do too.
Next month. He'll be here for the takeover.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. But we're here. Two of us in person, one remote. We're here to talk about something that's really not too sexy in the Bitcoin space, which is recruiting, getting talent into the companies that exist in the space and the companies that will be built in the space. I'm sitting down with the co-founders of Bitcoin Talent Co., Andy and Michael. Michael, we work closely in many things. Andy, I've been just introduced to you in the last couple months, but I'm very excited about this project because I think it's desperately needed before we dive into the nuts and bolts of how Bitcoin Talent Co. came to be, what you guys are going to be doing, and the mission, because I think it's a very important one. And like I said earlier, a desperately needed service in this space. Andy, let's learn a little bit more about you, your background in recruiting, particularly in the tech sector in San Francisco.
Yeah, so as you said, I mean, my whole career has been in the recruiting landscape, and for better or worse, yes, here in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, the entire startup scene, right? And so for the better part of 10, 12 plus years now, I've had the fortune of recruiting internally at large companies. I was actually an early employee at Uber, which obviously a household name now, but I was there way back when it was a burgeoning startup, almost 10 years ago now. Seeing that company grow from just a couple hundred to 20,000 people globally by the time I left, a real crash course in how to hire at scale. And then obviously seeing the downstream effects of what can happen when hiring processes are broken. So yeah, my stint there was PhD in recruiting, if you will. Aside from that, I've had the opportunity to work in agencies, also supporting early to mid-stage startups here in the Silicon Valley landscape, right? And then actually for the past 3 years, I've been running my own business. So I started a recruiting firm back in January of 2020, again, focused on that early to mid-stage tech landscape, supporting seed to Series C companies across a wide array of industries. B2B, B2C, both, everything within those two buckets. And for the most part, it's been going well. I've enjoyed my journey as a business owner. I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of exciting companies, but to the side of this, my journey as a business owner has been kind of running in parallel with my journey as a Bitcoiner, right? And in the past 3 years, especially the past 3 years, goodness, everything we've seen, the global financial markets from COVID to now, my goodness, if you don't get Bitcoin now, you're not paying attention, right? And so for me, these two paths have been really running in parallel. And as all Bitcoiners, can attest to, at some point, you can't have that. You can't be living in two worlds, right? So how can I marry business with pleasure? For me, it seems obvious now, but for the period of a couple months, I was just trying to think of how I could transition to a career in Bitcoin, how I could support Bitcoin at large. And light bulb went off. I've already built a business, built a product and a service that actually can prove valuable in the Bitcoin landscape. And so for me, just thinking of how to repurpose the infrastructure I'd built, repurpose the recruiting services I'd built to now start supporting Bitcoin-line companies is kind of where the initial seed was planted for what has now become Bitcoin Talent Co. This was happening towards the end of last year. Wanting to do this in the right way, I knew I came with the recruiting expertise, but I thought it would be super important to really align with industry professionals, people who are already in the space today. And so that's where I reached out to Michael. It seems like we've known each other for years now, but we really just started chatting a couple months ago. Pitched him on the idea, Bitcoin Talent Co. Michael, to your credit, it clicked right away. He really seemed to understand what I was trying to do. He had experiences of how this could have been useful in his own background, whether with 1031 or Unchained. And so long story short, we got to work, we started building the building blocks of Bitcoin Talent Co. And here we are launching officially today. So really thrilled.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. I think, Andy really embodies the ethos that you have of like, just do it, just jump in, right? Sometimes we can overthink things and it's just like, let's go. If we have a thesis, we have a product, we have things that people want, which they've already asked for. What was interesting, you said in the beginning is it really isn't like recruiting isn't sexy unless you need it. And so there was two lenses I looked at it. Like when we were trying to scale Unchained from 10 to 100, it was the bottleneck. And when you invest in a company, it is the bottleneck after the capital comes in, because the only thing after Bitcoin that's more scarce is human capital that understands Bitcoin and can actually operate at the highest level. And so when Andy talked to me, I was like, well, of course. And, I've mentioned this to Parker, and we thought through like trying to find somebody, because every Bitcoin company has its own like nuance. You have the traditional world being able to execute at a high level, whether you're in product, design, engineering, but then going into a company like a Strike and Unchained, whatever the Bitcoin company is, has its own subtle twist on what's needed and finding that right mix. And I specifically think of like client solutions with Unchained Capital. There was a mix of needing financial services, but also understanding multi-sig collaborative custody. And then also being able to speak to people and having a traditional background in sales. That's practically a unicorn. It was a unicorn back in 2020. It's still a unicorn because there's very few people that have that like skill set mapped out. And the other part is the thesis that we both have held is that the majority, if not all the businesses and individuals that are going to scale, most of the businesses and individuals going to scale Bitcoin haven't actually come in yet. We're still so early. And so that's where it's really interesting having Andy, for better or worse, sitting in Silicon Valley and SF. We'll get him out one day. We'll save him. We'll get him down to Austin. But close to that network is how we can incept the next wave of folks coming in that would have traditionally looked at Web3 and get them down the right path early, and then in the right position so we can do what we're all here to do.
Yeah. No, like you said, the bottleneck, one of the largest bottlenecks in the space is getting that intellectual capital into the space and then able to execute. Like you mentioned, Strike and Unchained. Strike, obviously innovating in the Lightning Network. That's a whole different monster than multi-sig quorums at the base layer protocol. So finding that talent that actually understands the nuances between these different areas of the Bitcoin stack is not easy. And so what you guys are building with Bitcoin Talent Co., it's more than just a simple recruiting firm, correct? You guys have to vet potential talent But not only that, you can help produce talent via education as well. So that's going to be a big part of what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I'll let Andy speak to some of what he's already been doing, but I'll just emphasize to your point how important it is, like when we think about Unchained specifically and educating on collaborative custody and discussing with Bitcoin holders, high net worth individuals, why this is a better format. You can't just kind of get onboarded in a week or have a class, because when you think about going to somebody that has a large amount of capital tied up into this asset and they're parking it with you or trusting you, like there has to be this visceral conviction and understanding, and there's a process to that. And so something like that at the time required proof of work. It required somebody already either being a client of Unchained or having leveraging multi-sig and can really speak to it. But there is this concept of you can shorten that gap and all the different nuances we talk about, whether it's Lightning, Unchained, design, somebody at Fold. There is this world where you can actually tighten that and shorten that time to fill. And there's different ideas there, but I'll let Andy kind of talk through what he's been doing existing, and then like some of the thoughts that we have and really being able to help Bitcoin companies.
Well, kind of starting at more of a higher level, I look at it this way, as Bitcoin assuredly kind of absorbs the wealth from all other asset classes. We believe this to be true. We think we're on the path. We know we're on the path to hyper-Bitcoinization, right? So as this happens, so too will it start to attract the top talent from other industries, right? That is something that will, to some degree, happen organically, right? But it will happen over time. It'll happen slowly. And to the extent we can kind of close that gap and speed that up and bring the right kind of like innovators and builders and operators to the space today to help build the consumer apps that will drive adoption, to help build better user experiences and infrastructure and mining services, all of that. Like all of these things are gonna ultimately help Bitcoin at large, right? And so for us, we look at it in a couple ways. Bitcoin, I will say this, it's pretty unique with respect to other industries where you're gonna have talent pools coming from different directions. We'll start and just say that the existing kind of like excitement within like diehard Bitcoiners today, that's amazing. There are already people who have made the decision to dedicate their lives to this, to transition careers. You don't find that as much in other spaces. There's no like, people just, I need to quit my job to work in CPG. I got to work at a consumer marketplace. You're not finding this, right? So Bitcoin already has that above others where, to the extent we can raise that flag for people who are already expressing interest, already excited to come into the space, great. Let us know and we'll help connect you with the right companies. So that's a huge talent pool. But to build the Bitcoin companies of today and the ones that are still to come, with only that existing talent pool, it's not going to be enough, right? So this is where, the actual recruiting machine that we're seeking to build, and what I know, as a recruiter, just maybe a chip on my shoulder, right? But recruiting teams are important. Recruiting is a process. Recruiting is a skill, right? And building team.
We're not frozen.
Landscape with operators from other spaces, and this is where we can talk about all of the facts that we know in the recruiting landscape around, the vast majority of the workforce being made up of passive talent who are not actively seeking jobs, right? There's an exceptionally higher number of high quality candidates coming through outbound sourcing than inbound applications. I think it's like, sourced candidates are over five times more likely to be hired than inbound candidates, and so this is something that we really need to be focused on as well. Is bringing the talent pool from both sides. And so that's some of the systems and tools that we're putting together. And to some degree, not reinventing the wheel. I don't want to take away our secret sauce here, but recruiting as a service has existed for decades, right? This is a valuable resource for companies. We're just, surprisingly enough, looking to be the first ones to focus that on the Bitcoin landscape. And so, starting this now, it's really exciting to see, I think, what we can start to do to support the space.
Yeah, and you cut out there for a little bit, but I think I grokked what you were saying. Outbound, so going out to talent that exists in other areas is much more successful than inbound people coming in, putting in their resumes. And so I guess on that side, like doing the outbound, like knowing that there are these companies with particular needs, and I know you guys have a few lined up at Bitcoin Talent Co. What's that process like of pinging somebody, doing an outbound reach? Like, hey, I notice you have these skills. We've got a company over here in the Bitcoin industry that's looking to fill a role that you may be good for. What's that process sort of like? He dropped out.
I think we lost him. He texted me.
What'd he say?
Did we freeze?
And he's back. There we go.
You're back.
All of it. It was a beautiful soliloquy.
No, we got it.
We caught most of it.
All right.
Yeah.
Let me know where you lost me, though.
Well, I think on the note that he left off, so Marty was asking about the outbound, and this is a healthy, not debate, but the market will tell us that I have this thesis that traditional outbound will always be effective, but that there's been this missing intermediary in the market, because what we know about Bitcoiners are sitting at these companies. So
Andy's an example of one.
Exactly. They're reaching out, and some of the best folks at Unchained Capital reached out to me cold on LinkedIn, from the BlackRocks of the world, Truist, that were looking for positions. And there's just been this difficulty for individuals at these large scale companies to get in, whether it's present themselves, figure out if they're even hiring. There's just like this mismatch in the market. And so that was one of the big light bulbs when Andy approached. It's like the kind of thing that's like, well, this has to exist, because if we don't do it, somebody else is, and it needs to exist, because that intermediary to facilitate, okay, well, I have design, I have product, I have marketing. And then that's where I see the ultimate opportunity as being that two-sided marketplace to be able to match in the time to fill, because it's one thing to find the right person for 6 months or 12 months, but to be able to do it in 6 weeks after you raise capital and get to market is an incredible business opportunity and moat. And that's part of the thing we can talk about as some of the advisor team that's come in, because we don't know design, we don't know product, we don't know engineering, but we do have an understanding of the Bitcoin landscape and who are the right people, and then how to like vet and understand them. Because that's another component we should touch on, is just being able to think strategically in this market. Because you can hire a recruiting firm, and some are going to go cold outbound and literally have everybody's had it where somebody hits them on LinkedIn or email and you're like, why is this person spamming me? And then at best, you're having somebody that understands somewhat strategically, like, okay, well, I'm in a SaaS firm, I'm B2B, design. But to have that strategy and understanding somebody's business along with the Bitcoin nuance is like where we're, in my mind, positioned perfectly to not only help companies find the right fit, but then help the right people in that middle spot either get the little missing pieces or get the right fit right out the bat, where somebody comes in, it's like, oh no, you know everything. You built Spectre and you're at a financial service firm, and Unchained's looking for this. This is a real world example of somebody we brought in that was like already built their whole thing. So it's like, they got it.
Yeah.
It's about being more efficient, right? So how can we shorten the hiring cycle? How can we improve quality of candidates coming on board, but also like how we retain candidates moving forward, making sure that we place the right person who will be successful for the long term. And so part of that, it's reaching out to the right folks. It's doing what we as recruiters do and finding that passive talent. But again, leaning on our advisor network, it's how do we truly vet a designer or an engineer, right? How do we design the interview process itself before we even start reaching out to candidates to be perfectly aligned to finding the right fit, right? And this is where we're thrilled to actually be working with such a strong advisor network to be able to bring into the fold, as it relates to executing these searches.
Yeah. I mean, I've been saying this for years. The space needs more competent and high caliber designers, particularly UX designers. But again, it's hard to design for Bitcoin, particularly around user experience, because you have protocol level, you have Lightning, you have Liquid, if you want to throw that in there. We'll have Fedimint soon. Then even at the protocol level, you have different address structures. You have Legacy, you have Wrap SegWit, you have SegWit version 0, V1. Now we have Taproot addresses, and like communicating that. I know you guys have worked very hard at Unchained, Sahil, particularly to communicate with the end user, the end client, what exactly is happening in a vault when you switch out keys, or what address you're using, or if you dump it in Xpub. These are like learning curve things that are going to take some time for people to develop and then actually be able to apply their skills in this industry. It's so early.
Yeah.
And then I think that actually is a great segue into why the education piece is going to be super important for us, because we know that these problems are the most important problems to be working on right now. That might not be so widely known. There are talented product designers trying to build better APIs for like plaid type banking structures, right? Or I mean, my goodness, the list could go on and on where talented designers exist today. But to the extent they start to see that the success of Bitcoin and realizing the sound form of money, the most sound form of money ever discovered, right? Can actually bring rationality back to the world, can bring so many positives, right? When you start to see that as actually like the most important thing to work on, then you're going to get that kind of talent. And again, I keep saying this, but it's all about shortening that time frame, right? How can we bring those most talented operators into this space today as opposed to years down the road?
Yeah, and I think you guys are launching this at a perfect time. We're sitting here February 15th, 2023. So far this year, there's been over 105,000 layoffs in the tech sector alone. There's a lot of people, a lot of talented people out there who are looking for jobs. There may be many of those Bitcoiners you described who are working at these traditional tech firms that wanted to get into Bitcoin and now have the opportunity to actually focus or may be forced to focus on breaking into the industry.
It's terrible what's happened, but I think framing the layoffs themselves as something that could have perhaps been avoided, if Bitcoin were more widely adopted at this point. It's an interesting kind of angle to look at, but that's actually part of my journey to Bitcoin was frustration with what was happening, seeing your portfolios up and down, going through layoffs, seeing friends and family suffering financially through this. Right? It's everything's been very short-sighted financial decisions on both personal and company fronts. Right? And so, loose analogy here, but if you could look at what's happening and the pain being felt to the marketplace and how Bitcoin can help to fix a lot of those issues, then hell yeah, I want to go work for it now.
Yeah, I think touching on this, like there's the thought of the cyclicality in the market and the ebbs and flows of expansion of Bitcoin and then the retraction is something that I think is really going to resonate. It already has. We've kind of been a little short to go out and do business development because I do think there is something to the thesis of we want to build two sides of the marketplace. And so rather than do full outbound, we want to have that kind of that growth effort on folks coming in after we launch and being able to say, hey, I'm doing this, whatever the vertical is, and that I have an interest in the space. I have this many years of experience. But this cyclicality, and this was one of the things when Andy approached me, it's like from our experience at Unchained, somebody coming in to recruit generally doesn't have a background in Bitcoin. So they have a background in recruiting, but they don't understand Bitcoin or the firm. And so there's a learning curve that comes there. And so that learning curve comes and so it comes with time. And it doesn't only come with time for the individual, but it comes from time from the hiring managers, because now you're interviewing folks that aren't necessarily the best fit. And it comes from the folks that are interviewed as well, right? They have jobs or whatever. And so by the time you get to, let's call it 3 to 6 months, because this stuff isn't fast, especially if you're not even in Bitcoin, now you're hitting your stride and the market's basically topped out and you still need to hire, or you've maybe gotten a few people. You probably got more through organic networks, right? Versus like the traditional outbound from somebody that doesn't know Bitcoin. And so a year later, and this is somewhat kind of in parallel, but a year later, then the market, you're not hiring anymore because you've outpaced growth or you're at this static, nice equilibrium. And then the person either, and we've seen this across even the Bitcoin industry, there's either layoffs or they just leave because there's not enough work. And so now you're stuck and you're like, well, we just trained somebody for a year. And so there's this real world application of embedded services that Andy can share more about, of like they're traditional to recruiting, but then I think they're really going to be applicable in the Bitcoin space. And we've already heard demand for it. It's like, well, why would I do that when I can just have somebody embedded with me as a platform, can use all the processes, building those out, which I didn't even touch on. You still have to build out how do you like actually have a proper hiring process and respond. So I think that's really going to be interesting here because it's a nice positioning. Eventually, hopefully we don't have these cycles and we're just kind of ebbing and then we're just in it. Maybe that recruiting comes back to Bitcoin companies, but I definitely think there's something there from an efficiency and capital preservation to not have to hire and deal with all of that.
Yeah. This phenomenon I see to be true across all industries, to be honest. It's a sad truth that through each of these layoffs, recruiting teams, people teams are usually the very first to go, right? And so you've seen that happen a lot. This is my world that I come from. I have tons of friends, former colleagues, who are feeling this kind of pain right now, and it's unfortunate, short-sighted. Talent teams are valuable even in down markets. There's lots of things that these folks can do to provide value for a company, but that's a whole nother conversation, right? So what I think will happen is external services like ourselves will be a more valuable kind of proposition, because we can flex up and down with your needs. You go through a hiring sprint, bull market kicks off, everyone comes in, 100 hires in 6 months, like great, we can see that through. Unless that hiring pace keeps up though, then you're not going to need that same kind of recruiting input, right? And so it's fine. You can flex the sources down, the resources down, so be it. Come back to us when you need more help. But that's an easy thing for a company to go through. And for us as well, looking at us supporting a number of companies, we will always be able to be available for those who need the help, right? There's this interesting phenomenon I think will happen where I keep talking about more and more talent coming into the space. I also think more and more financial capital coming into the space. You looked at 1031 as one of the leading Bitcoin-only investment firms, but that will continue. And we can say whether it's good or bad, but non-Bitcoin focused investment firms will also want to start investing in Bitcoin companies. And so you start to some degree, break away from like in the traditional world, like the overall macroeconomic cycles, and Bitcoin, I think, breaking away from the, we'll call it 4-year cycles as well, where companies who raise money are kind of immune to whatever's happening, right? If you just raised tens of millions of dollars Series B to build out the next, strike or the next rip, whatever it may be, you're going to be hiring. You are going to be deploying that capital, and so you will start to see the overall Bitcoin itself will go through cycles, but individual companies will kind of be at different arcs in their own growth journeys as well.
Yeah, no, and I think this is a good opportunity because this is something we talk a lot about at 1031, particularly for companies that are reaching their Series A, Series B, and hitting that growth stage or potentially hyper growth stage. And Andy, as somebody who was front and center on the ground floor of one of the biggest unicorns in the last 2 decades in Uber, I think it'd be very valuable for anybody who's running a company in the space listening to this episode to hear more about your experience there, like being one of the first hires there and then seeing it scale up to tens of thousands of employees. What was that like? What were some of the pain points that you guys ran into? What were some of the trip ups that you ran into that others listening to this may be able to avoid from your experience?
There were many, right? And I will say, despite all the downfalls, all the issues, pains felt as a recruiting function, I mean, it was still the experience of a lifetime. To have the chance to be in one of those types of companies at that stage, it's hugely valuable. Whether it's from the network that was built from the operators there at that time, or also just the learnings in your individual career, right? But to take some of the lessons from that, moving forward, I mean, the importance of just really well crafted interview processes up front, never breaking process to keep up with the pace, right? To be more specific, it's looking at how an equitable interview process that is like a formulaic approach, right? Defining this up front with a hiring team or hiring manager actually does make the process more efficient. You think that by using case-by-case changes and doing ad hoc updates to the process can make you move faster, but ultimately it'll break things, right? And so to be really steadfast in that and actually hold hiring teams accountable is a lot of the experience gained in that situation. We will always be working with clients who want to move fast, and we will help them to move fast, but we will stress the importance of aligning on a appropriate process up front to vet all candidates to ultimately get you the best person for the role, right? That's just one example of many, but those pain points were felt broadly outside of even just recruiting. We can look at all the issues that a company the size of Uber went through. They were one of the most documented companies to go through that, but every organization to some degree feels some of those pains that we felt.
Yeah, I think on the hyper growth side of things, like the thing that's not prepared in the market is a strike and Unchained going from 100 to 1,000. And how do you onboard enough people that are world-class talent and also get Bitcoin? I don't think there's enough. It doesn't exist. And so this component we kind of glossed over earlier, which is going to be a big part in the strategy from providing value, but also the top of funnel is education. And it's this thought I was thinking about, like Bitcoin, the ultimate aligner of incentives. It's been kind of crazy if you think about it. There hasn't been anybody that's put out the right education in like modular format that is like concise and deliverable, and it should be free, right? It's all out there. It just hasn't been packaged, and I was coming to the conclusion like there hasn't been an incentive to do it. Like what's the benefit? And to Andy's core point, it's like the core business is recruiting, providing world-class talent, and there's monetary incentives there. But then on the other side, there's education that's required as a top of funnel for folks coming in and wanting to learn the different verticals that map to their personal journeys. But then post that, well, what does it look like when Strike goes to 1,000 people at Unchained? Like, and somebody's coming in, they can't like inherently have 6 years of experience looking at this. So you need to develop the right packaging for them to come on and be able to ramp up, whether it's 6 weeks, 6 months, whatever the timing is. We'll develop that. We'll work with companies to do that. And this is a future state. I'm kind of riffing on like the thoughts we're thinking about. But this also maps to traditional companies right now. There's firms, without naming names, that are either in like, publicly traded or the big, crypto exchanges. They're paying people a lot of money to like teach their teams about the metaverse and like DeFi and all that stuff. And it's like that same format. It's a very easy pitch to say like, hey, like it's the same 1031 pitch or Unchained pitch. It's like, let us tell you where the signal is. Let us explain what you should be paying attention to. And it'll be slow at start, but we're going to be on the right side of history because we're going to take the slower approach. And then they're going to come and be like, oh, that's the firm when I need my, and when I hesitate in saying my Bitcoin strategy, because we know this is just your strategy, right? Like It's just like an internet strategy. It's like, no, this is just our strategy. Now we need help for it.
No, I mean, we've seen this a lot at 1031 the last few months. People coming back to us like, oh, I see why you guys are running with that thesis. It makes a lot of sense after seeing all the chaos in this market. But talking about the education piece, so are you going to have like broad education just for people looking for jobs, and then will you have sort of dedicated education courses for particular companies to get potential talent up to speed with how they operate individually on the company side of things?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. It's to Michael's point, a lot of this, all of this to some degree exists out there. And I will say, actually, there is great content. There are people who have done it the right way. It's just, again, more of the issue of packaging it for the right audience, right? And so the way we see it working, it's obviously free access to educational content for that self-driven person who maybe they've already said to themselves, yes, I want to work in Bitcoin now. Where do I start? How can I learn? Again, come to us. We can give you some of that information. We can also help connect you with the right companies if it comes to that. But then, the use case, again, as Michael said, of a company who's going through hypergrowth. We keep using Strike and Unchained, but so many other companies out there who will be going through this kind of arc. To some degree, maybe having to sacrifice, like having all hires being existing, dedicated, like diehard Bitcoiners, right? And that's okay. I want to be clear. Like as long as someone is coming into these environments, like expressing interest in Bitcoin and wanting to be in the space and identifying at least to some degree why Bitcoin is different than everything else, then they can come and provide their expertise from their discipline, right? But those companies, from an onboarding standpoint, should help these individuals to kind of integrate into the company and understand, obviously, what that particular company offers within the Bitcoin ecosystem, but then Bitcoin at large. What are some of the talking points that we all know to be true now? And so, it's packaging it as like onboarding type modules for large organizations who want to obtain and retain the right kind of talent.
Mm-hmm. And how's it been? I know you guys have been talking to many companies in the space. How's it been received from them talking to you guys?
It's really funny because it's the similar approach of like, why hasn't this existed? Or like, of course, like I mentioned, we're talking to we keep the discussions limited simply because of I really think there's this market of folks that are going to be very interested and want to like have that equilibrium fit versus like you have a bunch of demand and now you're going out to the market to fill it versus knowing that we exist now and there's a place for that. But to the main question, it's like, well, yeah, of course it should exist. And then there's going to be a lot of firms that do this. And so that's where it's probably worth mentioning the advisor team we put out of, and disclosure, Marty is an advisor. There's not a specific niche because you're kind of all over the place. I think I like to think of the mining as like that thing that we're missing. But of course, you've done the media stuff. You're spread all across.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and then a few others. So Sahil on the design, Justine coming in on the education, and this is like a specific vertical that we think we would love help. But of course, everybody is pretty multidisciplinary in this space. CK from Bitcoin Magazine, a longtime friend, operations leader, has helped scale that company. And then keep me honest if I'm forgetting anybody, but last but not least is our good friend and buddy, Rockstar Dev, coming back from the dead.
He's dead. He's dead. His new NIM.
Yeah, his new NIM. But yeah, I mean, obviously Rockstar has been incredible in the space with whether it's BTC Pay server or with Strike and leading that. And he's really at the forefront, to be honest, of a lot of we talked to him about this, and he's done some incredible stuff on the assessment side of really thinking through how do you get that proof of work before coming in, because that's the old fiat world, right, where you just like submit applications and you're just like getting the job, versus in Bitcoin there's that nuance of sharing, why your interest is there and going a little bit further than just like, oh, I'm interested in digital assets. And so we actually did this as we had some experience with this, and it worked very well when we were hiring. So I think there's definitely something to it of like, what is the proof of work before you start kind of talking with folks?
Yeah, no, it's very important. And I think I'm very excited again. Because we talk about this all the time. Like, there's incredible talent in the space right now. There's also incredible talent outside of the space that we desperately want to pull in, because we think they should be building out this future that we all know needs to be built, because if not, the world looks pretty shitty. And so like, what I'm really excited for is Bitcoin Talent Co. getting that talent into these companies. And then like you said, Andy, like, depending on what your vertical is, maybe you're a designer, maybe you're a back-end engineer, a growth marketer, whatever it may be, but you have a lot of friends in the industry that you're in. As soon as we start picking off some of that core talent into the space, and then they begin like inducing FOMO in their friends in the traditional tech sector, like, yeah, it's great over here. We're building the future.
We talk about viral loops and like consumer businesses in the tech world a lot. I mean, I think that'll start to happen to some degree here too. I'm thrilled, actually. Mike and I have been laughing about this, but with the official launch and kind of really putting our flag out there, I know that we're going to have so many people reaching out to us that we know already, right? But we never knew to be Bitcoiners, right? And this, like, people kind of coming out of their holes, right? And I mean, that's where it starts. Yeah, just the first, hey, I'm curious. Hey, I'm interested. And then from there, I mean, yeah, it's a pretty short path to you finally getting a job in Bitcoin, right? Yeah.
And what would you say to those people out there working at these firms that are down the Bitcoin rabbit hole? Maybe they have NIMs that they're tweeting from that they never want their employer to find out about. Like, there's always been that meme that like, it's too nascent of an industry, it's too small, there's too much career risk if I make that transition and go all in on Bitcoin. I mean, we talk about it like I've got this media company, it's all about Bitcoin. I'm a partner at 1031 that's investing directly in Bitcoin. I've got mining operations. My whole life, I've bet my whole social and financial capital in this industry, and that's scary for a lot of people to take that jump. What would you say to anybody with those types of apprehensions out there? Like, I mean, my honest thought is following trying to marry your career with your passion, right, is never going to serve you wrong, right? And even if that industry itself doesn't succeed, I don't think this would be the case for Bitcoin, right? But maybe mapping back to my Uber experience, there was a plethora of the Uber for X type companies that sprouted up. As we've seen with the original, Uber itself has had financial issues for a long time, just making the marketplace dynamics work, things like that. All these Uber for X companies sprouted up. They got a lot of good talent. They raised a lot of money. A lot of them went under, right? But those folks who are great operators, they still got a job after. They weren't like, there's no stamp on them moving forward. Don't hire this person. So I think you can separate the individual, the operator, their personal experience from maybe perhaps choosing an industry that didn't work out. Again, I don't think that's going to happen for us at Bitcoin here, but yeah, don't avoid taking that risk. If you believe that Bitcoin, working on Bitcoin and having Bitcoin succeed is a noble pursuit, you're going to be well served by following your passions there.
Yeah, I'll take a little bit of a different approach in the sense you marry your career capital the same way you marry your personal economic capital. It's the amount of education you have. So if you're still early, I don't know if the volatility makes sense in coming into a space that may have layoffs, the company may not be capitalized. But similarly, if you don't know much about Bitcoin and the volatility, you may be shaken out if you didn't know much other than like number go up. But on the flip side, we all know whether it's tech, Bitcoin company, in tech, the earlier you are, the more financial upside there is. So it's in your best interest to figure out like what's going on and understand why it makes sense, to Andy's point, that you didn't make the wrong decision. Because if you get it, getting laid off can be two things. You can either go back to Google, which would suck, or you can go to the next company and leverage that experience, because the point still stands that like human capital in the Bitcoin space, the knowledge is very rare. And so
Or
like
you
that,
can start your own company.
or you can start. Yeah, that is a very good shout out to, that's the other side, is that maybe you're interested and you're not interested in going and joining a company, but you have a great idea and you're part of these world-class operators, which is the thing that's like we've said, but I don't think it's fully like understood. Is similarly at WeWork, Uber, like even ahead of Google, was the best human capital I'd ever experienced, like the sharpest minds in the world. Those people coming into Bitcoin is going to be incredible, whether they start their own business and we participate in funding them, or they go and join a company that we've invested in, or they go and join a different company. Like getting them into the space is how we get to where we need to be. And that's like ultimately how we ended up in this position. I didn't think I was going to be part of a recruiting firm, but like at the end of the day, it's like what you talk about with mining or the Bent. It's like you just kind of pick up the shit that needs to be done, because that's how we're going to get, all this stuff fixed.
Yeah. If not me, then who? If not you, then who? If not you, Andy, then who? But this also gets into a broader theme that we discuss a lot at 1031, and something that we're paying attention to. Right now, we've been, in this conversation, been focused on getting talent into Bitcoin-focused companies. But moving forward, if we believe that Bitcoin is going to succeed, every company is going to be a Bitcoin company, because they're going to need to accept Bitcoin and add Bitcoin value-added services to their product suite. And that presents another opportunity, not only from the 1031 perspective, but from your perspective. You guys can position yourselves as Bitcoin Talent Co. The Rick lost Andy again, but he'll come back. And I know you can riff on this, so I'll continue the question. You sit here hyper-focused on Bitcoin now, but at some point in the future, all these traditional tech companies are going to need Bitcoin talent, and you guys will have the stack that allows them to onboard people that actually know what they're doing.
That's the most fascinating part, that is like the alpha, if you will, like that most people haven't woken up to, is that whether it's the cute, and I'm patronizing ourselves, and like where people think it's the cute VC firm that's only interested in Bitcoin, or the cute recruiting firm that's only interested in Bitcoin, how big is that? It's like actually every company needs talent that understands Bitcoin. And so all these large technology firms, and we'll not pick on them, but like leverage or bring up Replit and Amjad, like when they realize with the AI and just everything that they're going to need to programmatically have Lightning embedded into like these different things they're building, well, where do they hire those people? Like they're going to need some background in Bitcoin. And this is the same thing with like large banks that are going to eventually wake up and realize, okay, now we're going to build this out. And I won't name the financial firm, but there was somebody that came on the scene back in 2020 that made a big splash in the institutional space, and they raised a lot of money, and they lost like half of it because they went to headhunters and they went and picked off people on Wall Street, and they went and lent against ASICs at a 10K price, never knowing that it could go down 70%. And that they're physical, and you have to go on some ranch in the middle of Wyoming to get it back, to get your money back. Like that is inherently, that's intuitive to anybody that's in the space. But if you hire somebody that has no idea what they're doing, that's not. And so you can see how like this is the key to building a sustainable business, whether it's a large Wall Street or institutional firm, or it's a small Bitcoin company, or anybody in the middle. It's like you have to have this knowledge, and the knowledge is few and far between right now.
Yeah. No, again, going back to like the trope, we get that a lot at 1031. We'll go out, we'll pitch, hey, we're a Bitcoin only VC firm focused on investing in infrastructure, and a lot of people are like, oh, that's cute. Like, you're not in Web3, you're not in NFTs, any of that. It's like, no, we're not. But believe us, at the end of the day, this is going to win out against all that, and you're going to need to either have exposure from the 1031 lens, or you're going to need to implement this into your business processes from the business lens. And when people wake up to that, like having a dedicated recruiting firm like Bitcoin Talent Co. is going to be a massive value add, because their internal operations, HR, people operations is not probably paying attention to Bitcoin and going to be able to scale up that knowledge to hire the correct people. Yeah,
I actually have a question for Andy that we haven't talked about. I'm curious. So Andy, in between Uber and starting his firm, worked for a recruiting firm, and I don't know if you're comfortable saying they're a leading firm for that, like help with Silicon Valley's best venture And I'm curious, like, what your feedback is there from the learnings and anything like that, based on what Marty said, how that mirrors to your experience.
Yeah, I mean, I've always just had this bias, perhaps because of the world I've lived in, the companies I've come from, right? Recruiting has been cemented as like a valuable resource. So it was never me like, I never see selling recruiting services as like a pitch. Like it's going to be needed, right? How can we just create the best version of that, right? And how can we have the one that's most aligned, obviously, to companies in the Bitcoin landscape, being able to talk, being able to do the right vetting, right? But this is something that will always be needed, and it's not always in competition with internal talent sources either, right? We serve as an extension and or an augmentation of what other recruiting efforts you have going on in place already, right? And so I think there's always going to be a way for us to plug in and provide support as much or as little as is needed.
Yeah. And so, where do we go from here? You guys are launching. I mean, we're recording this today. You're launching officially tomorrow, but this will be released on launch day.
Yep.
What do we tell anybody out there, whether you're a business or an individual, a business looking to hire talent or talent looking to get into the space?
It's as simple as that. It really is. I mean, on the business side, if you have active searches on which you need support, obviously we're here to help. If you are curious, you have questions about how to even begin these hiring processes before kicking off with a full-blown engagement, we can offer value there and always be a thought partner when it comes to hiring Bitcoiners. Then on the candidate side, simple. We'll have be able to direct people to our website. We have a general application. If you're curious, you already want to submit your information. Let us know what you're looking to do. Whether it's engineering, marketing, sales, et cetera. We're excited to start building that kind of engaged community of job seekers within the Bitcoin landscape too, to then ultimately match them with the right opportunities.
Yeah, I think the ultimate goal is like, if somebody came to you or me or Andy that was a friend in the space, there's only so many Bitcoin companies. Like, hey, do you know anybody good in that space, in that role? We're really trying to scale that, whether it's bringing in recruiters into the space, providing our strategic background. So whether it's a company that we've mentioned, another company that's looking for individuals, I found out, like, just based on a limited experience with Bitcoin founders, they're not very good at like recruiting, because you don't necessarily want to go sell your company to people why they should work there. There's a few reasons why, but the idea is that we would understand your company and understand the people you need. And this is a conversation I had with Rockstar and how I like experiences. Like, when you're trying to scale a business, you're looking at every individual as like it's your job and it's your paycheck that's part of it, because if it doesn't work, then you're basically out of money, you're laid off, whatever the business goes under. And so like that's what I really want to emphasize, or like how I want to help us scale this business, is thinking through, well, how do we truly partner with Bitcoin companies and not just go out there and say, oh, we're hiring, we're going to give you a bunch of people, get a bunch of people in front of you. It's like, no, how do we find the right people for your business? And so we have to execute on that, but that's really one of the big things. And then Andy, I don't know if you want to share the design experiment we're doing, because we're not designers. If you give a little background before we wrap on that.
Yeah, this is a great way to end it. Kind of a little, just a little tip of the hat to the community, right? So in launching, we'll have our website, everything's ready to go, right? But to Michael's point, we are recruiters, we are operators. We've done all different kinds of things across our career. None of us are designers, however. And so we are very excited to have a fun little contest for the design community, the Bitcoin design community, to help us design our logo and the whole brand identity that we'll have moving forward. So what you see live out there now will not be for long. We're going to be posting on Twitter kind of the guidelines for the contest. And really excited to help you get some great submissions from talented designers in the space. We will be offering a prize. We'll be sending sats to the winning design submission, and more to come on that. But really excited to again, kind of from day one, look to the community to help us build this together.
Yeah, design bounty. We'll call
design
it
bounty. So is Bitcoin Talent Co recruiting for your own company right now? Is this what's happening? Is this like a bounty that'll lead to a full-time job?
Possibly.
Yeah, I could see. Maybe.
I think the tentative announcement we were thinking during Takeover in March. Andy's going to be down here. Eric, our other co-founder, will be down here as well. It'll be a good time to get everybody together, and then
Yeah. And I don't want to wrap up just yet. I know I said, where can people go find
This is your show. We wrap up whenever.
There's other questions, like, because that's one thing, and I've used it before, and I'm very happy these people built these products, but like the jobs boards, like how would you compare yourselves or the value that you add above and beyond.
I can't believe we haven't touched on this yet.
Yeah.
Can't believe it. So there's a lot to be said for it. I mean, the job boards that exist in the space today are valuable. I actually look to them. I commend them. I think they're necessary. They provide just a small portion of what's needed to really have that inflection point and bring more talent into the space, though. Yeah. So a couple things I'll say. All companies should advertise their open roles. I mean, from a signal standpoint, from just communicating with the market, helping to describe what you're trying to do. It's always helpful to have that public-facing job description. And then to take it one step further, I mean, we'll say a site like the Bitcoiner Jobs, they're probably the leading one. I'd say definitely the leading one out there. What they've done that's great is solving the discovery issue, right? So by consolidating a bunch of different companies that are hiring, anyone who, again, is interested in a job can go there and just there to find the job posting that they want, but also maybe one they hadn't thought of, a company they never heard of, right? So that's actually a really exciting thing to accomplish as well, as by that discovery piece. But I kind of mentioned this earlier, looking at inbound talent as your only source of hire is not going to get the job done. It's definitely not going to get the job done when you're hiring at scale, right? And so you need to augment inbound with outbound efforts. And I walked through again earlier, the significantly higher conversion rates of source candidates over inbound candidates, the higher quality that comes with that. Nothing against people who are applying, but just, in the recruiting landscape, we know it's a lower conversion rate of hire compared to referrals, first and foremost, or sourcing, passive talent. And so that's what we do. We take it one step further. I mean, a job board is great, but we will be more kind of the value we have is behind the scenes, if you will, right? Actually working closely with companies hand in hand, partnering to understand exactly what they're looking for, and then going to market to find that one person, right? So that's what the value is.
Yeah, I think there's a function of time that's important where an individual may come in, show interest after this episode, but they're pretty happy at their current role in the fiat world. And 6 months from now, we have an engagement, or a year from now, and we're able to categorize and figure out the right internal infrastructure to know what that kind of person was looking for, the right fit, and then going back out to them in a similar fashion. That is that outbound, but within our infrastructure, and saying, oh, hey, we have this interesting opportunity that we've been, we remember you're very talented, but there wasn't the right fit at this time. And you can imagine this is really interesting when the market's running, right? Because everybody's interested, and now you get all the noise. So you got to filter between that versus the people that are right now, quote unquote bear, that have indicated interest and that have peaked. Anybody around right now is pretty much, gonna be around. Yeah, they're gonna be around for a long time. And I think that's a big thing that we hadn't even talked about and I randomly stumbled into, is that, when the market's flying, everybody wants to get into quote unquote digital assets, but it's like what you saw from that institution I mentioned, they all left after the market crashed.
The diehards stay around for the bear market. And that's another thing, Andy, I think you can probably touch on this more, just lean into the value prop. I imagine there's a ratio that exists for companies that are trying to do this themselves, but really don't have the chops to do recruiting at scale like you guys can. So I imagine there's this ratio of people that are interviewed versus people that actually get the job at the end of the day. Do you guys help lower that ratio?
Yeah, I mean, if essentially what you're looking at is the funnel, if you will, of candidates from the very top all the way through to getting a hire, right? And the conversion rates, we can get really, really deep in the weeds, which may not be as interesting for the audience, but thinking of conversion rates and how we measure both quality of the process, meaning how quickly candidates are moving through each successive stage. Are we being efficient? Are we providing a good candidate experience? All these things are super important. But then also, equally, if not more important, the quality of the candidates, right? So what percent of candidates that we reach out to respond to us? What percent of those candidates that respond to us ultimately are a good fit for the role? What percent of those does the hiring manager agree is a good fit for the role? And then so on and so forth down the process to the end. So you'll always have drop-off. You should have drop-off, right? But working with clients to understand what we should be targeting, what numbers kind of define a successful process. Yeah, that's absolutely part of the value we provide and driving that with a team.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the it wasn't concern, but it was a thought when I referenced earlier about scaling ourselves and thinking strategically and understanding the landscape. And I should have known Andy's a great recruiter because he's been in recruiting, but we brought on somebody from a large exchange that will be helping in scaling this. And I had a call and I was just blown away. He was previously at large fintechs, just understood, but he was very strategic, and he was the exact person that he had basically illustrated why, how he had grown his career and how he had to understand hiring managers' needs, and really it was a partnership. And I think that gets lost on a lot of people, especially like folks in regular tech, or if you're in Bitcoin and you have a hiring manager and you're trying to recruit. A lot of that, like, and this is probably a fiat culture thing, but like you just like submitting numbers and you're getting to them versus somebody that like actually genuinely cares and wants to understand, because that's going to change the conversion number on like, oh, does this person the right fit for what this other person's trying to achieve? Because somebody wanting to work at Fidelity is very different than somebody wanting to work at a 10-person company. They could both be Bitcoin. And so that's just part of like this whole understanding and how we think about it.
Yeah.
I don't address this enough actually, but I think it has to be said, to kind of solidify the value again. I come from a world where recruiters are talented. They're valued parts of the organizations that they work at. They're successful, right? But yes, I have to admit that the recruiting industry at large, there's a lot of bad in it, right? And I think anyone who's been in a corporate environment has worked with bad recruiters or a bad external firm, right? Throwing resumes over a fence, seeing what sticks, not acting like true partners. And again, I don't think of this because it's not the world I come from, but yes, we have to state that that's not what we provide. We are true partners. We lean in, and we essentially act as if we were your own internal talent team. So I think that's really a point that has to be driven home too.
Yeah. The one thing I wanted to ask you, Andy, is I know we touched on it earlier, like having a strict hiring process is important, but what are some of the biggest mistakes you see companies make while they're hiring outside of not having that process?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of it does tie to the process. So not to rein it back to that, but the skipping of steps here and there, not having a similar rubric, so to speak, for which you're assessing candidates. So you like John for this reason, you like Sally for that reason, but then how do you decide which of them is actually right fit for the role? Are you grading them to the same assessment essentially? And so that's where things really derail the process, and they lengthen it too, because you start to go on this like you're kind of chasing a moving target, so to speak, in terms of what you're actually looking for. So part of our job is to rein us back to what we identified before we even started talking to candidates, what the right fit is. If it shifts over time, and it does, as you start to talk to candidates, that's okay. But we all collectively as a hiring team need to be aligned on what that is so that we can make changes and then again, move forward with the new scope. So that's the biggest thing, I think. Beyond that, it's, there's a couple of things I can mention. Off the top of my head, I mean, not being really buttoned up as it relates to how you're pitching your compensation philosophy, things like that. Not being, forthright with that in the process in terms of making sure that it's the right fit for a candidate from a financial standpoint. I mean, these are reasons why things can break down at the end as well. So to the extent we can get pretty buttoned up on that up front, it'll obviously help us as well.
Yeah, no, because I think there's a lot of lessons that many of the companies in the space need to learn. You'll find like hardcore Bitcoiners, typically with a highly technical background, starting a lot of these companies. And like I experienced myself here. Luckily I found Logan, but even at TFTC, this media company, I'm like, how the fuck do I hire people? Like, I don't know. Like, I know what I want, but I don't know how to like articulate that and then go vet and filter and bring people in.
It's not intuitive. And then like you go, and if you don't have the background, and to Andy's point, the process, then this is all from experience. Like, well, maybe you don't have the right process to follow up. And like, it may work okay with Bitcoiners, but eventually like it's a kind of a stain on your brand as a firm if you just like leave people hanging. And I would imagine Andy has like lots of thoughts there. And then the other one that talking with one of our advisors that's helped grow is like the just inherent bias. Like there's this thing that's always stuck in my head even before any of this is that like somebody finds out if they want to hire somebody within the first 60 seconds, and then the rest of the interview, they're just basically filling that version of like how they like the person or not. And so to Andy's point, it's like having that rubric and figuring out, because there's a lot of people that, I like this person, but people are very good at interviewing. They're very good at telling you what they want to hear, but it's like you got to follow a certain process to really figure out, is that the person for your role? So yeah, I think we may need your services here at TFTC because I'm not very good at I'm not good at interviewing people. I'm like, yeah, what do you do? Just have them on the pod.
That would be an interesting format. All potential candidates, all finalists have to come on the pod.
You have a live episode. The one with the most downloads gets you hired.
I do think that there is something to this, this filtering of interest. Like, Wolf did some, we saw it on their website that we liked, and I don't know if we're going to incorporate, but like where you submit an application for their talent pool. There's some format where you submit info and you just basically have to pay 10 sats.
Yeah.
Just
to prove that you can actually
just so you have a wallet, right?
Yeah.
And you know, again, when we're advisors on the engineering side, like assessments on what does that process look like. And I think there's something to really vetting, and I don't know if it's for an individual company or ourselves, but like there's something to like just showing a little bit of effort. I think that's kind of like gone away with how many people are hiring, how easy it is to spray and pray resumes. And then you're just kind of like in this weird game versus like just doing a little proof of work to vet, because I think that goes a long way. And if you're really interested, that shouldn't be any skin off your back to do.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that's an easy, low-hanging fruit filter. Like, can you pay an invoice in Bitcoin?
Yeah.
That should be something anybody trying to get into Bitcoin company should be able to do.
Yeah.
And if they don't yet know it, they'll learn how to with our education services.
Yeah. It's fascinating. I'm excited for you guys.
Yeah, we're excited to have you as an advisor and support us. And you've already been sending us folks over. And this is part of the cool part is like there's a lot of people that we're friends with, to Andy's point, that have been looking for roles. And now we're just going to get hit up and we're going to be able to like figure out how to facilitate that and then help the companies that have been looking to find those people.
Yeah. And I would take an opportunity to speak to anybody at these companies looking for talent. Definitely reach out to these guys at Bitcoin Talent Co. because, I mean, again, I see it from TFTC. Just having interviewed a bunch of people in the space, we see it at 1031 with all the portfolio companies that we have. Like there is this disconnection between hiring and finding the talent that is right for the particular roles that you're looking to fill. And like you said, like when you guys started pitching this to me a couple of months ago, I was like, oh yeah, this is desperately needed. Because like I said in the beginning, recruiting isn't sexy. And to be honest, Andy, like up until I started talking to you, I had that negative connotation of recruiting. It's like people just throwing resumes over to see what sticks.
Yeah, you heard it here first. Parker Lewis said it was genius.
Genius.
Yeah. So
no, we've been telling people behind the scenes in meetings. They're like, oh yeah, obviously.
Well, Parker knows we were in the trenches hiring in 2020, 2021, and it was not easy. Collaborative custody is very nascent, so hopefully it's kind of grown, but yeah.
Yeah. That's the other thing companies have to realize is, again, going back to the scarcity of the intellectual capital outside of engineering, like the sales teams, the growth teams that can actually articulate and understand these different nuanced products throughout the ecosystem is extremely scarce right now. Highly valuable assets.
Yeah, we have a friendly firm that's been looking for a CFO for a while. And I think it's been like 4 months. So if they just can't find it. They're not even a client of ours. They're just a friend. So if you're a CFO out there and you're looking for a role in a Bitcoin company, reach out. Love to get you.
Yeah, let's heckle some of the people in the traditional tech space or banking industry that are listening to this. If you are listening to this, you're probably a Bitcoiner. You're sitting there thinking, I don't know. Come on.
This is the sign, right? You've been thinking about it. You've been listening to this pod. You've been on Bitcoin Twitter. It's time to get a job.
Yeah, you've been listening to Marty for 5 years, knowing that you want to get in the space. Now here's your answer. Here is your solution. It could be tomorrow. It could be a month from now. It could be a year from now. But yeah.
Start the process as early as possible. We need you. I can't be building all this shit. I can't be doing like Scrib, mining, VC. Like we need more talent.
Yeah.
I'm just taking on as much as I can. Come help us. We need to build the future.
If not you.
If not me, then who? We got to fix the money.
All of you.
Yeah, all of you listening, get off your ass. Follow the link in the show notes.
There you go.
Fill out an application. All right, what do we have? Final thoughts here outside of heckling these people listening that should be working in Bitcoin.
Just really excited to see where this goes. To be honest, there's a huge opportunity at hand, and it's I think one of the best things to do is have the flexibility to know that you don't have the bookends. Bitcoin is money. And we're at this starting point. Let's see where the rest takes us and just try to give back as much as we can.
Yeah, I mean, just to sum it up, this is arguably one of the biggest levers, to increasing Bitcoin adoption, shortening its path to hyper-Bitcoinization, getting the right people in the space. And so to the extent we can even provide a small amount of value in that arena, we're really excited for the opportunity.
Yeah, well, I wish you well. I'll be advising you as we go on this journey together.
We'll give a shout out for Parker. Bitcoin Takeover. Andy will be in town. Our other co-founder, Eric.
Is that why he was in the window?
No, he was just turning on the on air.
Oh,
yeah. Just trying to be respectful, keep the noise down. We'll all be here if you're looking for a role. You want to say hello. Bitcoin Commons. Parker's blowing it up here. So yeah, we'll have a
really
quote
forward to that.
headquarters in Austin and SF out of the Commons.
Yeah. Maybe we'll do a 3-way in person.
Whoa.
Well, I'm not
Pod.
We'll do it in person.
Okay.
3-person pod.
Let's do it.
Close on. Andy,
And with that,
enjoy the rest of your day on the West Coast.
thank you guys.
We've got a busy
appreciate
day
it.
ourselves. We got to get going.
Yeah.
All
You
right.
got a lot. I mean, you got a very busy day.
Yeah, I do. It's a lot going on, but it's good things. It's exciting. Building in the bear market. I know we're trying to wrap it up, but like I just had this thought come in. Like this is the most building I've ever seen in the bear market. This is the most bullish bear market I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Things getting built, companies getting funded. Like there are companies still getting
The
funded
right
in this
time.
space.
It's
Yeah.
the right time. Yeah.
Yeah, our heads are going to explode when the market takes off. Just absolutely explode.
Yeah.
So please reach out.
And a little bit more heckling for the people out there sitting in tech companies or banking. It's a great time. Companies are just getting funded. Maybe some of them have equity comp packages for you. Like get in at the ground floor, not when we're ripping 200K at the top of the bull market. You're gonna get in, and then you're gonna see some turbulence. It might scare you. Get in now when the dust is settling, and we're gonna be going on our way up. Gentlemen, let's go win. We're gonna win.
We're going to win.
We're
Peace and
gonna
love.
win. Marty, thank you.